Nutrition Society of Nigeria names Vice President Yemi Osinbajo National Nutrition Vanguard.
It is your advocacy over the years that has led to the point where government could not ignore the nutrition space at all.
Federal government inaugurates Presidential Committee on Flood Disaster Prevention.
Develop a comprehensive action plan for preventing flood disasters in the country.
INEC Chairman Professor Mahmood Yakubu swears in 19 resident electoral commissioners.
Our loyalty is to Nigeria, and our allegiance is to Nigerians.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on the 2022 floods and public health challenges.
The 2022 flooding across 34 states of the Federation took the country by storm as it displaced thousands of people, wreaking havoc on the masses and farmlands with unprecedented casualties.
That's right. There were over 613 persons have been confirmed dead. The property worth billions of naira damaged. And perhaps for the first time in the country's flood history, Nigerians witnessed coffins containing human remains exhumed from the place of burial by the ravaging floods, floating around their places of habitation.
Honestly, Kingsley, that must have been the harrowing sight, for persons in those vicinities. And, statistics show that among the states worst hit are Jigawa, Adamawa, Kogi, Benue, Bayelsa, Anambra, Rivers, and Delta states. However, as the flood waters recede, public health concerns are mounting as experts note that water bodies that provide drinking water must have been contaminated by sewage, waste materials and chemicals that mingled in the flood.
Absolutely. Now, these are certainly red flags of impending epidemics in the affected states, if not the entire federation. Earlier this week, the Nigerian Medical Association's Committee on Epidemics and Pandemics Awareness raised an alarm on the possible outbreak of epidemics as a likely aftermath of the devastating floods across the country. And the committee has therefore called on governments at all levels to step up action against the looming outbreak of diseases.
And some short-term solutions suggested and recommended by the Nigerian Medical Association include provision of potable water to affected communities, provision of water purifiers, as well as habitable settlements with insecticide-treated bed nets for hundreds of thousands of Nigerians that are internally displaced as a result of the ravaging floods.
Well, as it stands, we may be having some respite from the rains and the floods, but there are ultimately concerns about the public health burden arising from the possible spread of communicable diseases by the flood waters that swept across 34 states of the Federation. So what measures are governments putting in place to avert any epidemics? Because as it's often said, prevention is better than cure.
True. We shall take up the issues with our panel of health experts on Good Morning Nigeria today. I'm Ian Ray John. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I joined my colleague Ian Ray to also welcome you to the program live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. In the course of the program, we have our regular complimentary segments. These include newspaper review and business. For now, of course, we take the highlights of the morning news with Najatu Tijani. Good morning, Najatu.
Good morning, Kingsley and Yenri. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news with me, Najatu Tijani. Beyond physical safety, securing the livelihoods of Nigerians is a guiding principle of the Buhari administration's policy and interventions in nutrition and food-related issues, says Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. This was when the Vice President was being honored with the award of National Nutrition Vanguard by the Nutrition Society of Nigeria in a brief ceremony held at the Presidential Villa, Abuja.
We did not have the NSM would not be able to make the advancements that we made or the achievements that we made. It is your advocacy over the years that has led to the point where government could not ignore the nutrition, the nutrition space at all. We could not ignore it mainly because of the work that we have done through the years.
The federal government is determined to prevent all cancers and reduce the incidence of late presentation in order to improve cancer treatment outcomes in the country. This was the stand of the Minister of State for Health, Joseph Ekumankama, at the official opening of the 2022 International Cancer Week.
Ministry and partners have continued to improve access to cancer treatment through the Cancer Access Partnership Program, with over 2,000 patients already enrolled in the 17 hospitals, with additional 6 hospitals at the final stages of activation within this year.
Meanwhile, the federal government has inaugurated the Presidential Committee for the Development of Comprehensive Action Plan for Preventing Flood Disaster. The committee, set up by President Muhammadu Buhari 10 days earlier, was inaugurated by its chairman and Water Resources Minister Suleiman Adamu at the Presidential Villa.
Disasters in Nigeria. 2. Identify and work with critical stakeholders in flood disaster management. 3. Identify and visit selected strategic flood-affected and prone areas.
Meanwhile, the Permanent Secretary of the State House, Tijani Umar, says the 2023 budget of Nigeria's seat of government will focus on completion of priority projects. This was at the Budget Defense session before the Senate Committee on Federal Character.
We promise that we will continue to implement our budget judiciously for the greater good of the citizens of this country.
We will be able to do the needful, and hopefully that will meet your needs. I assure you that if there is need for us to see you again, we'll call you almost immediately.
Meanwhile, as the 2023 general elections are fast approaching, an independent observer group, the National Peace and Development Forum, has assured Nigerians that all arrangements put in place by the electoral umpire are in order. It is, however, appealing for a reorder of the sequence.
The electorate will have a sense of belonging and participate more in the process, such that the entire electoral outcome will be a reflection of the true will of the people if the state election precedes federal polls.
Still on the elections, officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, have been warned to be non-partisan in their conduct. The INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, gave the warning while swearing in 19 resident electoral commissioners in Abuja.
Our loyalty is to Nigeria, and our allegiance is to Nigerians. Only their votes should determine winners in the 2023 general election. Nothing more, nothing less.
Of the 19 resident electoral commissioners, 5 are reappointed while 14 are fresh. And that's the news for now. The program continues with Yenri and Kingsley after the break.
Our country people, they talk with one voice. Them say that Asiwaju Bola Tinubu them want as president of Nigeria for this president election.
Asiwaju Bola Tinubu na the man where we all know and see all the good work in they do for the country, especially when him be governor of Lagos State.
Now him God use turn Lagos to the best state for Nigeria.
Today, many people all over Nigeria.
All right, it's time to talk business as Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency signs a memorandum of agreement for one local government, one product towards boosting local production. Let's join Comfort Amudu for details.
The Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is partnering Nigerian Export Promotion Council and other stakeholders to end the rejection of Nigerian agro exports to other countries. To this end, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Niyi Adebayo, has inaugurated a 10-man implementation committee on Nigerian agro-export reject. The committee is to work as a team to make sure Nigeria agro-export are competitive at the international market.
I wish to urge members of the committee to rededicate themselves so as to be able to accomplish this urgent national target in good time. Distinguished members of the implementation committee, I want you to consider yourself fortunate to have been found worthy of this assignment, and as such, justify the confidence reposed in you by working as a team to realize the dream of stopping the rejection of our agriculture.
The processors, the exporters, the stakeholders, even the logistic team is a complete value chain. We need to get them informed, we need to get them to know what the international market requires, and we need to build their capacity, and we need to get the infrastructures up to date to make sure that we comply.
Meanwhile, the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency, SMEDEN, has signed a memorandum of agreement for One Local Government, One Product, a program which sets to empower MSMEs in all local governments to contribute to job creation.
To be impactful and to still make sure that we touch the whole country, we decided to change it to One Local Government, One Product, so that we'll be able to reach everywhere within a short time.
Director General of SMEDEN, Wale Fasonya, said the overall objective of government through the OLOP program is to deliver upgraded capacity in human resources, technology and finance to selected viable cooperatives with a view to improving their products in order to achieve competitiveness and meet domestic and international standards. With Business News Comfort, I'm Modu.
Thank you, Comfort, for the business news package. Up next, newspaper review.
All right, we'll begin with the Al Jazeera newspaper this morning, and the lead headline on the front page of Al Jazeera reads, "Flood. Federal government releases 12,000 metric tons of grains." And riders, we have erect shelters for victims in 22 states. Dangote committee donates 1.5 billion naira to NEMA. Below that headline, looking at the left-hand side of the front page of the Al Jazeera this morning, we have, "I never said Adebanjo no longer in charge of Afenifere," and that's credited to Fashoranti, and that's on page 13, details on page 13 of the newspaper. Below that, we have the government blames out-of-school syndrome on insecurity. Details also on page 13, and then we have INEC chairman swears in 19 new recs. Away from those stories on the left-hand side of the front page of Al Jazeera this morning, on the right-hand side, we have irate youths attack Ondo monarch over deaths in community. And details is on page 22. Below that headline, we have military deactivates over 70 illegal refineries. And you can find the details on page 4. We have a picture of the Senate president here, and it reads, "The kicker, allowance to leaders address marginalization concerns." Just looking below the masthead of the Al Jazeera newspaper this Friday morning, we have this headline, "Effective use of revenue will boost tax compliance, says FIRS." And details is on page 26 of the newspaper. That's Al Jazeera this morning.
Okay, we also have the Daily Trust newspaper. The Daily Trust, we take the following headlines. From immediately below the nameplate, says still in captivity, 11 schoolgirls of FGC Birni Yauri. They have spent 505 days in captivity. One student of Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, 478 days. INEC chairman to Rex, don't go to government houses. And federal government to fund the Kaduna, Kano, and other rail projects with Chinese, Portuguese, and Turkish loans. Nigeria's non-export rises by 62% to $2.59 billion in 1 year. I take that again. Nigeria's non-oil export rises by 62% to $2.59 billion in 1 year. Naira redesign. 3 governors under our radar over stashed cash. That's according to the EFCC chair. It says state chief executives mulling table payment to launder money and commission to intensify BDC's raid and monitor banks. Cautions people selling property to hoarders. Buhari commissions Nigeria-Cameroon joint border post and bridge on page 4. That's where you find the details. We are not against salary increase for all workers, but, and you find the details of what the chairman of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission is hinting at on page 27 of the Daily Trust newspaper. And Shaban versus Sani, apprehension in Kaduna APC as court rules on governorship primary today. You also see there on the front page, Polish soldiers erecting a wire fence on the Polish-Russian border at Kaliningrad Oblast region. And of course, the intention, according to them, that's the Polish government, is to ensure that there are no illegal crossings on that border. So those are the headlines from the Daily Trust.
All right, there's a particular story on the front page of Al Jazeera that actually got my attention. FG blames out-of-school syndrome on insecurity. Well, I would say that, out-of-school syndrome has always been there until insecurity became a major issue, and then that heightened the out-of-school syndrome. And I think other factors that contribute to having a lot of children out of school should actually be looked at, so we can actually, solve the problem. Again, nobody's talking about what the flooding is doing to children in affected states. I'm sure they're out of school because maybe their schools are submerged or they're in IDPs far away from their schools and all of that. So, so many factors really. So I think that it should be that insecurity, one of the reasons for, the increased number of children that are out of school, not really the main issue.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with you. I agree with you. Insecurity has merely exacerbated the numbers because the figures that UNICEF released showed that there were some 20 million out-of-school children, and we have seen what has happened in recent years. But the whole idea is, how do you crash the numbers? How do you crash the numbers? For a long time, we were dealing with about 10 million. At some point, it climbed up to 11 million or 12 million, and now what we are dealing with is double that number. So what is it that has been done to be sure that these out-of-school children do find a suitable learning environment? The flood, of course, that has occurred in most parts of the Federation is temporary. And as the flood waters recede, those affected by the floods are able to return to their homes temporarily or proceed from temporary shelters, as it were. Then they resume their school. So out-of-school phenomenon this doesn't relate to this kind of temporary displacement caused by the flood, but the more fundamental issues are still not being addressed. It looks like sometimes the subnational entities don't see this as a major concern.
Oh, well, yeah, well, you may say that it may not significantly impact on out-of-school children, but just imagine those who probably would have lost, those who take care of them, as a result of the flood, or those who may never return, to their homes, may end up not going back to school. So, of course, it may not really, the number may not be so much, but let's look at it. I think that some children may not be able to continue school, at the end of the day.
Well, that's not unlikely, but we don't know yet what the numbers will be. What we have now, before the floods of 2022 came, was the figure I mentioned, released by UNICEF, which is 20 million. So let's deal with the 20 million in the first instance. And I'm sure that maybe by early next year, or by the close of the academic session, which is really in June or July, we would know from the data collected by the various state governments to say, oh, we had this number of pupils who were enrolled in our schools, but on account of the floods, these are the numbers that we then had at the close of the session. But what is significant to deal with in the first instance is the 20 million who are out of school. We have that number, and they are in different parts of the federation. Out of school phenomenon is not just a phenomenon that occurs in the northern part of the country. You have it in the middle belt, you have it in the southern part of the country, and so on and so forth. So those are the issues that they will deal with. There could be, of course, that crisis arising.
And then some schools may be submerged and may never be able to, if they are not reconstructed, some schools may never be back to operation.
Well, that's
certain
true.
Communities.
That's true, but of course they could have temporary shelters or temporary learning environments. It wasn't always right. I mean, you saw people's learning under trees in the past. So if this has been occasioned by an act of God, then it all calls for reconstruction and rehabilitation of those environments impacted. But the reason I'm saying this is that let's not begin to look for excuses as to why out of school children is growing in number. The numbers that we already have, how are we reducing them? It was always scandalous that we had 10 million out of school children throughout the federation.
So would you say that the school feeding program, improved, the number a bit? Or you think that system or that program didn't work?
It worked. It worked. But I think there was an encouragement on the part of pupils to go to school on account of the National School Feeding Program that was launched by the government. It worked, and we had interactions with persons who were participating in the program, either as providers or supervisors, as well as beneficiaries, either as parents or otherwise. We had a number of interactions with them on Good Morning Nigeria, and the reports indicated that pupils were enthusiastic, to come to school on account of what meals they were getting. The only challenge, of course, at that time was that there were only certain classes of pupils who were getting the meals, those in the lower classes, in the junior classes, and then their seniors then were giraffing through the windows, sometimes scaling the walls to get a grab of what their younger ones were eating. So that was the challenge with that, yeah. But otherwise, in terms of being the driver of higher school enrollment figures, that program worked. Yes.
All right. So let's just hope that the numbers that we have at the moment would actually reduce, and we'll see more of our children going back to school. All right. So we'll take a break now. When we come back, we shall begin the conversation proper.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, to begin our conversation, which is on the 2022 floods and the public health burden, let's take this background put together by our correspondent, Ekede Unduloi.
The flooding that came this year is one that has left bitter taste in the mouths of residents of affected Nigerian communities. 33 states are reported to be affected by the disaster, leaving in its trail destruction of lives, livelihoods, displacements, and shattered dreams. From state to state, the flood washed away houses, infrastructure, crops, and livestock, which reported fatality rates of over 600 people. And in few cases, there were reports of floating coffins excavated from their graves by the raging water. Experts say these are red flags of impending epidemic in affected states, as drinking water facilities have been contaminated by sewage, waste materials, and chemicals. Statistics show that among the worst hit states are Jigawa, Adamawa, Kogi, Benue, Bayelsa, Anambra, Rivers, and Delta states. Recently, the Nigerian Medical Association Committee on Epidemics and Pandemics Awareness raised alarm on the impending outbreak of epidemics in the aftermath of the devastating flooding across the nation and has called on governments at all levels to step up actions against the outbreak. Solutions suggested by the Nigerian Medical Association include provision of potable water to affected communities, provision of water purifiers, as well as habitable settlements with insecticide-treated bed nets. What have the affected states done to provide habitable accommodations for flood victims? What measures have they put in place to prevent outbreak of diseases due to the flood situation? Guests will be providing answers to these and other questions on this episode of Good Morning Nigeria.
Many thanks, Ekinwe, for that backgrounder. With us now to discuss issues around the public health burden from the floods, let's welcome Dr. Uche Ojinma, is president of the Nigerian Medical Association, NMA. Dr. Ojinma, glad to have you this morning.
Thank you very much.
Also joining us is a regular on Good Morning Nigeria, Dr. Isaac Eboja. He's a public health specialist. Dr. Eboja, welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
And we are also, of course, expecting to join us later on in the course of the conversation, one of the commissioners of health from the states impacted by the floods. Henry?
The next set of guests will be joining us virtually. First, let me welcome via Zoom from Dutse, Jigawa State, Dr. Kabir Ibrahim, the Executive Secretary, Jigawa State Primary Healthcare Agency. Glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, thank you, good to have you.
Also joining us via Zoom from Oka is Dr. Afam Obidike, the Commissioner for Health, Anambra State. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you.
All right. Last but not least, from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, let me introduce a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, Professor Abdulsalam Nasidi, the former Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC. Glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
It's my pleasure. Good morning, Nigerians. Thank you very much.
All right, gentlemen, once again, we are glad to have you with us for this discussion. But let's just begin by getting, as it were, a situation report from the states that have been impacted by the floods. We know that Jigawa, of course, took a hit in the northern part of the country. Anambra also suffered a great deal of the consequences of the flood. So beginning with Dr. Kabir Ibrahim, Executive Secretary of the Primary Health Care Agency in Jigawa State. Tell us what has been happening since the floods ravaged Jigawa. Are the floods still on, and what are the health issues that are popping up?
Good morning, everyone. Jigawa is one of those states that have been ravaged by this 2022 flooding. We had severe floods in 13 local government areas. Hundreds of thousands of people were actually affected. We had nearly 70 internally displaced IDP camps within the state. People were temporarily, pushed from their normal residences to places where they can be provided with some starting of care. There are so many issues that we saw when the flood actually started. We can look at them and discuss them precisely, looking at those that have direct impact on health of people. Then we look at the indirect effect of the flooding of people that were actually affected. First of all, we saw, disruption of routine services. People were not able to access routine services such as immunization, antenatal care services, delivery and health facilities, and that increased vulnerability to diseases and morbidity. We have also seen issues related to increased exposure to risk factors because of disruption of ecology. For instance, we've seen waters coming to places where people sleep and creating breeding sites for mosquitoes and other vectors such as snails and all that. We have also seen arrival of new vectors that were never familiar in those communities. River animals that were actually poisonous, snakes and all that within people's, vicinities. We're also seeing contamination of drinking water, fecal matter, having had to, contaminating wells and boreholes and all that. And there are other issues related to skin diseases, related to reactions, itches and all that. We have also seen increases in number of waterborne infections such as cholera cases, issues related with gastroenteritis, typhoid fever. These are also things that we saw within these 13 local government areas, and among the population there was affected. There are also physical injuries related to collapse of materials, buildings and other road and bridges. People accidentally run into bridges that were collapsed the previous night, leading to trauma, fractures, and sometimes even loss of lives. And the indirect effect that we saw were issues related to breakage and food security. People have lost farmlands, they have lost those things that were actually saved within, silos and, sacks within the common village setting. You wake up one day, there is no breakfast, and there is actually acute hunger and tendency for malnutrition, and the consequences of malnutrition were things that we've been seeing. We have also seen increase on social vices, especially in the IDPs, where people were exposed to unusual environments, men and women and people of different social background coming together to live in a temporary setting. So there were also those tendencies. We have also seen breakages in economic activities related to breakages in bridges and roads. People were not able to go to markets. The little food items that were stored within the village were completely finished within a couple of days. And there were, even if you have the money to buy, there's simply no road to get to the next village to buy those items. And then finally, we saw issues to do with breakage in the social system, leading to depression, and people were making all sorts of comments in terms of being depressed and all that. And so immediately, government took into action, and so many things were done. These people that were affected were moved, like I said, quickly to nearby public institutions such as schools, and they were housed there. They are provided with immediate food they need, provided with, blankets and some food items, and also medical supplies, drugs, and consumables. In addition to that, we have also quickly went into assessment where we look at children that were having the potential of becoming malnourished. As I speak to you now, these children are being addressed. They've been provided with the appropriate protocol for conversion from malnourished or moderately malnourished status to normal status. Medical.
All right, Dr. Kabir Ibrahim, thank you very much for the responses that you have provided. Before we also start dealing with the measures that the state government has taken, let's still explore further the situation. First of all, how long did the floods rage in Jigawa? Did 1 week, 2 weeks, like a flash flood? Or, as I also asked, do you still have the consequences of the flooding with you, or are the floods still there? So that we know whether we are dealing with a live issue or dealing with a residue.
Okay, thank you very much. We started having the floods in August, and it went through August and September. And even through October, we saw people still, some communities were still being flooded. The worst cases were in September. We had 67 internal displaced camps within the state. As I speak to now, most people have gone back to their normal houses, but there are still 1 or 2 or 3 IDPs that are still active. People are still outside, housed within school and other public dwellings, and care is being provided to them in those places. Like I said, the worst cases were in 13 LGAs, and like we have 67 IDP camps within these 13 local government areas. And currently, we are still battling with people providing care in 1 or 2 of those IDPs that are their communities are still not accessible because the water has still not receded. And in some places, the water has gone, but it's still very dangerous for people to move into those places because these are mud houses that have been already soaked with water full to the brim for a couple of weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And we have the fear that this building might collapse when they go back to this community. So we're still having certain issues that are still currently at hand. And like I said, even those that have gone back to their villages, we're still battling with them in terms of providing care, assessing the health status, especially also maintaining food security in those households. Thank you.
Dr. Ibrahim, for that update as regards Jigawa State. Dr. Obidike would like you to take a cue from Dr. Ibrahim. Give us a situation report. What exactly is it like in Anambra State?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. From what Kabiru said, the flood challenges is almost the same in every state that are affected, both the direct and indirect effect it has on people and on their health. But we still have flood in Anambra State, just one or two local government it has started receding, but we still have like 13 IDP camps that are still active, and there's something actually Kabiru want to mean the health impact, because we are almost you see some of those people you see rushing out to their to the IDP camps. Some of them are pregnant women and children that are under 5. So most actively we still have 13 IDP camps that are very functional in Anambra State, and we have like over 20,000 of those of those people staying in the holding centers in the IDP camp. And unfortunate thing is that we also have some disabled people in the camp. So these are the challenges, and though the water has started receding in one local government where people are determined to go back, but we won't allow them to go back there until we take all necessary precaution to ensure their safety as they're going back. So it's still the water is still there, and though it's receding, but gradual and slowly. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Honorable Commissioner for Health, Anambra State, tell us some more. For instance, how many local governments are there in Anambra, and how many of them were impacted by the floods? We know there was this boat disaster in which scores were died. And then what are the health issues? You've talked about pregnant women, you've talked about under 5 children. What are the health issues that you are seeing, for instance, in the IDP camps?
Before, the issues are almost similar with what Kabiru said, but we have 21 local governments in Anambra State, and initially 5 local governments were totally affected, and some of these local governments actually were cut off from the other local government that you can have access to probably some of the relief material you could actually get from them. One of the major things we found in the IDP camps at every stage of it was the increase in the malaria, which is expected of all that. But with the intervention, it went down. Then with the diarrhea and all that, which because of hygiene, because in those IDP camps, the specific things that we see that affects people more is more like the personal hygiene, which could affect them on their hygiene, on the hygiene, which affect the gastroenteritis. Some of them were having at early stage, but with health education and precaution methods we put in place, and with help of the governor, we're able to curtail this. Kabir talk about cholera. Unfortunately, we have not had that in the camp already, because we are trying to. It's when they settle down, go back in their places, that we start having this incident more of it. So, but what we try to do in this short period was actually to start sort of educating them on the use of water guards and the use of hygiene in the water, so that we're not able to have that. So one of the ID camps we actually closed down 2 days ago. What we did was that before then we started introducing them to the water guard, because some of the water in the camp were using the sachet water drinking. They may not be able to be affording it as they go back home. So what we do, we started introducing to the water guard, educating them on how to use it, and we believe that as they go back home, we're actually giving them most of them, so that as they go back home, they will continue to use it in order to reduce the risk of a cholera they could be having. Then also, the very essential thing that is we are scared of, which the governor is actually trying to do, is the environmental impact on this, like reptiles and insects that could have entered their houses following this flooding. So we are actually trying to look at this with the environmental personnel to ensure that as people that want to go, we go and help them out to ensure that we fumigate the environment and make it a bit safe for them. But in all, the direct impact of it in terms of the immunization, because unfortunate thing is that this happened when we're having monkeypox and some outbreaks. So we were actually sort of scared at the initial time, but with health education and having to come in there in terms of bringing the health in all the IDP camps, I failed to do. We have like 15 of the IDP camps. We established a clinic in all the IDP camps, which will link them up to a general hospital. So most of the cases we had, like a trauma in the IDP camp, people that had deliveries, we have total of 6 deliveries in the IDP camps, and we have total of more than 5,000 under five children in the IDP camp. So with this, we found that we're able to streamline our healthcare system during this intervention, which is still going on, though the impact has started receding because the water has started receding and some people have started attempting to go home. No, so the next phase now we are thinking as government is post-flood impact, post-flood effect we have on these people in terms of agricultural destruction that have happened, because some of those people actually their source of livelihood is agriculture, and when we don't handle it, nutrition comes, and when nutrition comes, their immune system goes low and they are prone to having diseases. That is very.
Thank you so much, Dr. Obidike. We'll come back to you so you can, tell us about some of the interventions that the government is putting in place, to get these people back and, of course, make sure their health is not compromised. We have in the studio now Dr. Pagbara Newton Igwele, the Commissioner of Health, Bayelsa State. You're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
So I'm sure you've been following the conversation. We've heard from Jigawa State, we've heard from Anambra State. Could you give us, an assessment, or if you like, a situation report of what it is like in Bayelsa, the impact of the flood, how many communities were affected, and what's the situation at the moment?
Okay, good morning, Nigerians. I am Dr. Pagbara Newton Igwele, the Honorable Commissioner for Health, Bayelsa State. Before I go to mention what the flood has impacted in our state Bayelsa, permit me to express some reserves that I have concerning this flood in Bayelsa State. The flood is a national disaster. We never expected it at this magnitude. It's not of the making of Bayelsa State that the flood will come at this volume at which we have. And it's quite pathetic and painful if you come into Bayelsa and see the level of destruction that this flood has meted to our people. And as of the last time I checked, Bayelsa State is also a federated unit in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But we have not been treated fairly because this is over 5 weeks we've had flood in Bayelsa State and not one federal presence, not even a phone call or support we have gotten from the federal government in Bayelsa State. It's very painful, and we contribute significantly to the development of this nation. And
I'm sorry, Dr. Igwele, let me interject here so that we can also maximize the time. This is not the first topic and the first time that we are discussing the floods and the impact this year, 2022. The last time we discussed floods, we had one of your colleagues join us from Yenagoa via Zoom. We also had the governor of your state, Senator Diri, who joined us on a Tuesday live program. He joined us via Zoom as well. We've discussed the economic impact, and one of the challenges, I should mention this, is that NEMA, who's been our guest in the course of having these conversations, could not immediately access a place like Bayelsa because the east-west road was submerged and portions of it cut off. So what they then did, the dry land where the trucks got up to, they now sent choppers, that's to say military helicopters, to winch materials from there and take them to the various distribution points. We understood that, as at the last count, 6 of the 8 local government areas of Bayelsa were affected heavily by the floods, which is like 75% of the state. So these numbers are things that we already have. We have also seen former President Goodluck Jonathan wade through the floods to go to his own house. It is part of ways of seeking to say, look, where should the attention go? That's why we're having this conversation. We've discussed the impact on the economy. We've discussed the impact on infrastructure. Today we're having a conversation on the public health burden arising from the flood. So what are the key issues? We had your colleagues from Anambra. We had your colleague also from Jigawa telling us what the public health issues are at the moment. And the other guests, of course, will also be speaking to this. So we can have a laser focus on the critical health issues at this time and be able to deal with them. Doc.
Okay, thank you very much. And like you mentioned that in Bayelsa State we had about 6 local governments affected. No, it is 7 local governments that is affected out of the 8 local governments, and that would not be about 75%. That would be about 80% to 90% of Bayelsans affected. As I talk to you, I'm also a displaced person in Bayelsa State, and the effects on humans medically. First, I will want to talk about the social effects that this flood have on our people. First, when flood comes, for example, when it came to my house, the first effect I had was a psychological disorder I had at the first time. It will make you disoriented when flood comes into your house, because with the speed at which it's coming, you may not be able to know what you want to save and what you don't want to save at that point. And when it came, I was that confused. At this status, not to talk of those who don't have the privilege to be like us. And by God's grace, we were able to mitigate some of this effect that we had. But basically, on the medical aspect, we noticed when the flood came, first we set up a flood emergency operations center as a state and the health sector, where we're able to collate the various challenges that this flood will bring to our people. And on those issues, we noticed the basic thing that our people were faced was the malaria infestation, because most persons were sleeping on the road. If you get to Bayelsa State, everywhere was cut off. All houses were cut off. If you have an aerial view of the flood, you see that almost every part of Bayelsa State was flooded, except the major roads. And so people were sleeping on the roadside, and they're all prone to malaria infestation. And so what we need to do first for the intervention, we started getting insecticide-treated nets to deliver to our people. And then we set up mobile clinics across all the communities. In fact, we had about 20 mobile clinics that was going around from one community to the other, not only on the IDP camps. In fact, we became overwhelmed that in Bayelsa State, that every community, we had about 2 or 3 IDP camps in every community. And when 90% of persons are affected, you may not be able to even get the required logistics, even the mosquito nets, to reach out to everybody in Bayelsa State. And so the government procured a huge number of mosquito, about 50,000 mosquito nets, attached to each of the medical teams. As they move around from one community to the other, they prioritize, because it's not enough for the over 2 million persons that is displaced. So they prioritize for children and women of childbearing age and pregnant women. So these are the areas we prioritize and gave out the mosquito nets to this person before we now think of the men and then the other people who are displaced. And then secondly, we notice those who are also displaced, because they are living in the water. Most of them are hypothermic. And so the government thought it's nice that we need to get blankets. We got over 50,000 blankets also. We still need to prioritize these persons that will be given these blankets to children and pregnant women to at least warm them up. And then thirdly, one of the things the government also did, they acquired some what we call dignity pack. Now in the dignity pack, you have soaps, you have Dettol, antiseptics, because of the water has been polluted, antiseptic, and then you have toothpaste, you have creams, and we also prioritize the dignity pack, and I thought we also have sanitary pads. We prioritize the dignity packs, and we also give to women of childbearing age and children to ensure that when they get the waters, because they are bathing from the same water, and so they will put their antiseptic in this water and then they will to bathe in order to prevent some ailments. And then within this period also, we carried out over 45,000 medical treatment of different ailments across the states. And we noticed that most of them were malaria infestation and then some other ailments. Within this period, we took about 9 deliveries and some other casualties we have. There are some secondary cases we could not handle at the communities. They were referred to the general hospitals and then to the tertiary hospitals where they were managed. And so by God's grace, the impact is just so much, but we are trying to do the best we can to ensure that we mitigate this effect.
Thank you, Dr. Pagbara, for that update from Bayelsa. I'll quickly go to the NMA president now, Dr. Ojima. You raised an alarm that you know, we should get ready for epidemics as a result of the flooding. Could you tell us exactly, you've heard from the 3 states we have live with us now, and I'm sure you've been following developments in other states affected by the flood. Could you tell us, you know, some of the health risks associated with flooding, and what level of public health risk is the nation faced with at the moment?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to enlighten our people. The risk is much, definitely. When you're hearing that 90% of a state was flooded, the risk goes very high. When you're hearing that 33 states out of 36, an FCT was flooded, the risk is very, very high. That is one thing I want you to understand. Now, as an association, we had to raise alarm because a part of our job is to protect the health of the people of this country. And when we feel that things are not being done properly, the onus is on us to bring that awareness to the public space. We may really jolt them into reality. Now, a lot of people have talked about infectious diseases. One thing I want us to understand is that Africa, especially the most populous nation in Africa, faces what we call a dual disease burden. We have a dual disease burden because we are westernizing and we are still underdeveloped. So infectious diseases are with us. And then, of course, the chronic diseases are also with us. Unlike the developed nations where you have less of infectious diseases and more of chronic diseases, disease of ostentatious living with them. If you check all we have been saying, it's as if all the diabetics in Bayelsa and Jigawa have been forgotten. It's as if all the hypertensives in all these states have been forgotten. Those with other chronic liver diseases and stuff that are being managed, renal failure, that are under treatment, have suddenly been given a back seat while we are battling with malaria, battling with diarrheal diseases. What happens to those people? They are obviously suffering because the health centers have been flooded, hospitals have been flooded. I know a place like Bayelsa that even the state teaching hospital was totally cut off. So we had to raise an alarm because when it is over, now you may see a rise in stroke cases, a rise in renal kidney failures, a rise in other diseases amongst us. Now we need federal government and the state governments to please eschew all political differences right now and get together and work as a team. We need NEMA, Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, to please stop assessing which state is worse affected. If one Nigerian is affected, is enough for Nigeria to move to save one Nigerian. People are delivering in flood. People can't even access their drugs. There are people that actually live on drugs. You know that. When they wake up in the morning, they line up the drugs they take for their daily sustenance. Where would they get it right now? So it is time for Nigeria, from my perspective, to understand that a command and control center that will incorporate, because many things we see, you don't see a medical aspect to our emergency response preparedness in this country. And you don't see repeated drills to understand that this can come, and immediately it comes, this is how we roll out. Now, we talked about not assessing Bayelsa. If you're a National Emergency Management Agency, you should have enough choppers. You should have boots, because we have both upland and riverine areas in this country. So I pray that this time it won't be like COVID that came and we ran around, and after that I have not seen a sustained deployment to rehabilitate our health centers and hospitals to be able to take care of our people. Let this flood be the last that will catch us unprepared. Because telling me that the road was cut off, you see what happens in developed nations. They release the military to go and help in this kind of situation. I don't know whether the federal government didn't understand the intensity of what is going on. People, of course, where would they dispose human waste when the flood is up to their elbows? Of course, it has to be in that flood water. Because you and I know that there is no soakaway pit that can function when the flood has passed the level of the pit. Automatically, you can't flush down. So everything is up. And that is very dangerous. We're not talking of vector-borne disease. We're not talking of wild animals that have certainly started coming into people's area of domicile. So snake bites will likely increase. Crocodile and other reptile bites will also come. So let us all be ready. And of course, the chronic diseases are no longer being attended to properly right now. Because if NEMA can't assess a state, of course, the doctors cannot also function in that place, and other healthcare workers. So the risk is immense.
All right, Dr. Ojima, thank you very much there for your explanation. Just to also indicate, because we had the reports on several occasions on network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the Air Force provided some transport aircraft for the movement of relief materials, and then their choppers were also involved in trying to get those materials to inaccessible locations. But it's just to say the volume of challenge they were dealing with was just like the volume of the floods itself. So, but let's join Professor Abdulsalami Nasidi. We earlier introduced him. He's joining us from Abu Dhabi. Professor Nasidi, regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria and former Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. Professor Nasidi, from your perspective, what is the public health challenge or burden that we should be prioritizing on account of the impact of the floods?
Thank you, my dear brother, and once again, thank you for having me on this program. May I see this opportunity to actually sympathize with all those affected in our country. And, I'm particularly associated with Bayelsa. It's like my second home now. I have witnessed how, the flooding affects, that state really badly. I understand the emotional situation of our Honorable Commissioner from Bayelsa. We should, first of all, know that flooding now is actually a recurring phenomenon, in the country and some regions in the African country, particularly areas of the Benue River basin. Just not to repeat what others have mentioned, let me go straight to, what I think should be our priority. If flooding is a recurring phenomenon, just like the president of the NME has mentioned, then we should have in place mechanisms to be able to mitigate the impact of this flooding as an emergency. There is such a plan, and both the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NEMA, NIMET, Ministries of Health, Ministry of Human Resources, Ministry of Agric, Ministry of Environment, and water resources, all of them, they have this comprehensive response, preparedness and response plans. But the major problem is how are they activated and how are they being used to, first and foremost, prevent the possible impact of this flooding to humans. And that is what we are mostly worried about. How do you mitigate the impact? How do you prevent cases from occurring? And how do you prevent even deaths? Unfortunately, it seems we have not learned so much from even the past experiences. This has been mentioned by the chairman of the president of the NMA again. We had terrible flooding during the year 2012, and that should have, helped us to be ready, to get ready, to mitigate the impact. What are the issues that I believe, we should start immediately addressing? Where it's already too late, we couldn't mobilize to mitigate the severe impact. As you can see from Jigawa, from Anambra, from Bayelsa, we are already acting in the crisis. We couldn't do much to prevent the impact of the crisis. So that is a little bit unfortunate, but that's Nigeria's story. Many people are already psychologically dislocated, as also mentioned by the Commissioner of Health in Bayelsa. So what are the key diseases that I think that now we are inside the crisis? What do we do to prevent those diseases from killing more people? So deaths will be occurring from the physical effect of the that will be occurring due to the flood. And some of such diseases are the waterborne diseases, which have been mentioned: diarrhea, cholera, and so on and so forth. And then in this process, the water will displace, available habitats, both for humans and for the animals. And people have mentioned that, if the whole land is flooded, the snakes, the rodents, crocodiles, they will all run into spaces that are available, including humans. So humans and these animals will be sharing the small space left. Therefore, human-animal contact will be increased. And there could be snake bites, which is really increasing now in many states affected. Some even, dog bites and crocodile bites, etc. are occurring. Now, the second impact is chain impact. If the areas are flooded, people will lose their properties. They will lose even the food they are cooking. They have to cook, etc. So you have nutrition issue creeping in. Then the next is the issue of mosquito-borne diseases that we're all aware. I think somebody has mentioned that the population of the mosquitoes will increase because they like to multiply in fresh water. So we shall have a threat of mosquito-borne diseases like yellow fever. Malaria is already increasing, and we're having cases of new, vectors coming into the country. We have the Aedes albopictus that is transmitting dengue. Then we have a new mosquito Anopheles stephensis that is also going to increase the transmission of malaria. So cases of these mosquito-borne diseases will increase, unfortunately. Then we shouldn't forget that it was after the 2012 flooding that cases of Lassa started increasing, because Lassa is rodent, borne disease, and most of these rodents will now start running into human population. So it will affect not only the areas flooded by the waters, but even neighboring areas where these rodents will move. So these are the type of diseases that we should think about immediately. But I can assure you that the real problem will come when the water starts receding and humans start coming back into their habitats. That is the time we shall have even bigger problems, which maybe I will talk about later. Let me allow others to talk.
Thank you for that. You actually told us, some of the issues that we're likely going to face. Dr. Igboja, I'd like to come to you now, and I'd like us to narrow it down. We've heard from all our guests this morning, the health implications, mental illness, waterborne diseases, and all of that. Let's narrow it now to children, especially those under 5. We know that routine immunization at the moment will be stopped in these states. We know that they are exposed at the moment because, they are in crowded places, the weather condition and all of that. What is the health implication, especially for these children, that, their immune system is not as strong as that of adults and all of that? What should we be looking at for children right now?
I'm glad that the question you asked the NMA president was the alarm they raised, and this is exactly the issue, the same question that you're asking. Why we worry about the general population, our focus is even more on children under 5. And the problem with them is the fact that, one, they are very vulnerable. Two, many of them, especially the newborn babies and so on, are still being vaccinated against prevailing diseases, and many of them have very low immunity, and therefore are prone to a lot of problems. And therefore our focus, our priority, as far as health is concerned, should be on this group, the vulnerable group, the most vulnerable group. Everybody at this point in those places is vulnerable, but this group in particular is. And let me take the immunization issue that you're talking about, that somebody mentioned earlier. If a child is being vaccinated against a certain or some diseases, and all of a sudden there's a disruption of that series of vaccinations that the child is supposed to have, it means almost that that child has not been helped at all. That disruption can be worse than even started sometimes, like in the case of polio that we've had before. There have been cases of polio disease recently, or in the last year or two, that were because of vaccine-related issues, which we cannot go into now because of the time that we don't have. But the essence of the question is, we will focus more on children, their needs, malaria, dysentery, diarrhea in particular, the water that other people can handle, children cannot handle those water. Somebody mentioned, and Professor Nasidi mentioned it too, our worry right now is what is going on. But from the public health point of view, our worry is not only just what is going on. What is going to go on after this flood is even worse. The chemicals that have been dissolved in water that people are drinking, we don't yet know the effect that it will have in their system, their kidneys, their livers, and so on. We have to worry about that on a long-term basis. The feces that are floating around, and people are drinking water with them because they don't have any other source of water. Some of them can result now into diarrhea and dysentery at the moment, but there are also long-term issues like hepatitis and others that we have to worry about. And so the problem is enormous. The risks are great, and therefore we really need to worry. And let me say this, I'm glad, and I want to thank NTA, that you've brought commissioners from different states into this conversation. It is good that they're hearing themselves, and wherever they need help, or where they are not doing the correct thing and they listen to their colleague in another state doing something better or different, they would learn from themselves. We need to understand that there is a great need for coordination. NMA president pointed it out. The Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Works and Housing, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Disaster Management, and so on. Everybody has a role to play, and these are all interwoven. A healthy person, quote, healthy person is healthy because he has good housing, he sleeps well, he eats well, he thinks well, and if he's sick, he's well taken care of. When all this or some of these are absent, you are no more healthy. Therefore, my advice, one, let there be good coordination between the ministries, not only at the federal level, also at the state level. Point number one. Point number two, if we have not been learning our lessons, let's please try and learn now. 2012, 2015, 2017, 2021, last year, there was flooding. Not as bad as this year, but there was flooding last year. Let's learn to prepare. I'm glad to hear from Bayelsa that they have small packages now that they give people. Those are the kind of things that we should be preparing. If every place is flooded and you cannot drink the water that is around you, is there a possibility that there are packs that are already made and inside this pack there's water, there's biscuit, there's medicine that you can give to somebody in the IDP? Those kinds of things are things that we should be discussing. But let me also go back to the commissioners in the states. There must be now a very serious attention on record keeping. We want to know from the public health point of view, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, we should be able to look back. In 2022, there was a lot of flooding. What happened? How many people had diarrhea during that period? How many people had dysentery? How many people had malaria? How many deaths did we record? How many people were depressed because of the psychological impact and so on and so forth? You cannot have this information if you don't keep record now. We want to know what is happening in every state. And I'm very glad to the NTA, particularly grateful to NTA, because the questions you pose is, what is going on now? We want to know how many people are dying, so that we'll be able to compare this period between August this year and October now of this year. Let's compare it with last year. What is the difference? And if there's a difference, is it due to flood? And if there's no difference, why? Is it because we've done so much to mitigate or to handle the problem in such a way that there was no impact? We cannot do this, we cannot know these things if we don't keep good record.
All right, Dr. Isaac Abuja, thank you very much there for the points that you have raised. Let's return to the head of the Jigawa State Public Health Emergency, Primary Health Care Agency. That's the Executive Secretary. Dr. Kabir Ibrahim, earlier you were talking about the interventions by the state governments after listing what were the challenges that popped up in the immediate aftermath of the flooding, which is still lingering. But let's look at it this way. For instance, was Jigawa prepared for the health consequences of the flooding? Or, let's just be frank, or was it caught unawares? And therefore, what lessons are you carrying over from now? If you were prepared, how did your preparedness assist you in mitigating some of the higher consequences of the flooding?
Thank you very much. I think this is a very good question. Because we've had flood last year also, that is 2021, I would say we are prepared. There was a technical multi-sectoral committee that was set up, which comprised the Ministry of Health, Water and Sanitation.
It's like there is a freeze there on the Zoom connection from Dr. Kabir Ibrahim. If the engineers have an all clear to go back to him, we'll return to him. Dr. Kabir, if you can hear us, apparently your bandwidth is low at this time, so you are freezing. We are okay at our end here. That's what the engineers are communicating to me. But we got an insight into what you were then going to explain. Fine. You had a leg in to say, yes, you had the flood. All right. Dr. Kabir, I understand you are back online.
Yes, please, I am. Can I speak, please? I can hear you.
Yes, please, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so what I was saying is that we're prepared because we were also challenged by this flood last year, 2021. And we came up with a multi-sectoral technical committee that comprised people from health, nutrition, social protection, water and sanitation, basic education, information, environment, and women affairs. These people were actually meeting on a regular basis in anticipation of what will happen the years to come. Last year in 2021, we were ravaged with this kind of flood, and we had a large number of people that came up with cholera. We had to do vaccination. We vaccinated over 1 million people in the places where the instances were worst hit. So in preparation for 2022, perhaps it may come, There were so many issues that took place within that multi-sectoral setting. We did what you call risk assessment, and we started intervening in places where we're expecting these instances to actually happen. And I'm really glad to say that, in 2021, we had over 20,000 cases of suspected cholera cases. But here in 2022, despite the huge number of cases were barely 500. And we have very, very few mortalities because we were prepared for that. This committee pre-positioned interventions, health education was going on, and people were brought into understanding that this is a possibility. In addition to that, the state government set up a very high-level central committee to look at flood in the interim, on the medium term, and also on the long term. That committee is the members of that committee comprise most of the people of the State Executive Council, and there were clergymen from all social strata of life in the state. So these people actually been talking and been meeting several times to look at the people that were affected. We did detailed assessment on the technical aspect, looking at all these subsectors I'm talking about. What are the health issues? What are the social protection issues? What are agri and environmental and all that? And this committee is being fed into the actual circumstances in place. And there have been also resource mobilization subcommittee within the central committee to really look at how we can mobilize resources within and outside the state to support people who are actually affected. Right now, there have been a lot of intervention that were deployed by this committee, including cash transfers, including provision of basic supplies, medical supplies, food, and like people have been talking about, blanket and other things that are actually needed on an immediate basis. But probably more importantly is also the deployment of a long-term measure to look at the path which these waters actually pass when flood is coming into those areas that they're actually affected. We're looking at the possibility of damming some of those waters. We're looking at the possibility not only damming but also maximizing the product of the flood itself. Now that the water is receding, government is utilizing the arable land that were actually soaked and they're actually wet now to use crops and certain improved varieties of crops that can grow quickly within those water before the place is dry, or so that they can compensate for the large number of crops that were actually wasted. So it's an integrated response to this kind of thing. And the more we go through it, the more we get better, the more we get more informed about what best we can do to protect.
From what you have said, it looks like Jigawa was prepared for this, and not just health-wise, but in other ways. I'll quickly go to Dr. Obidikwe now. I'm sure you heard Dr. Ibrahim from Jigawa. Anambra State, you experienced this flood too, like you already told us and all that, and the health implications in your state. Were you prepared? And from your assessment so far, do you think that you can handle the situation you have?
Yeah, thank you so much. The truth is that Anambra has been frequently been a flood-affected state. So we were actually in the Ministry of Health and the State SEMA, Works, Power, and the health education aspect. We actually prepared, but the truth of the matter, this particular flood, we are overwhelmed. And the process continue because it's something that used to occur in 5 local government. Now it's stretching to almost 9.
Yet again, another phrase there from Dr. Afam Obidike, Commissioner for Health in Anambra. He was just trying to tell us a number to see how the floods have been spreading from just 5 local government areas. Anambra, of course, abuts the River Niger as the River Niger heads towards the Atlantic Ocean. Dr. Obidike, are you still there? All right, it looks like the bandwidth again is gone. We hope the bandwidth has not been flooded. Of course, that's by way of a joke, because bandwidth is electromagnetic and therefore no natural occurrence can directly impact it. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation and all our guests. All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. Let's come back to our guests here in the studios. Commissioner for Health Bayelsa, Dr. Igwele. Dr. Igwele, tell us, what are the critical health commodities that Bayelsa needs at this time? If you have them or you don't have them. Guests have talked about waterborne diseases like cholera, for instance. I was just saying while we were on that short break, reminding Dr. Isaac Abuja, he was with us last year, along with Professor Nasidi, when we were discussing cholera outbreaks in some parts of the Federation during the last year's rainy season. And they said, look, immunization is key. And immunization can carry you on for some time. So there are some of these waterborne diseases that are preventable. That's one. So what are the kinds of needs that you have now in Bayelsa? Let me also point out that when Lokoja and therefore 11 local government areas of Kogi were submerged by the floods, NEMA indicated to us here on this program that they had moved some water purification equipment to the areas that were affected. And then, of course, it was clear that Delta was going to be the next state to take the floods. And they said that they also moved some water purification equipment to Delta. These are equipment donated by the Japanese government, according to the information that we had. Does Bayelsa have any of those water purification equipment now? And how are you dealing with portable water supplies? First of all, your critical medical needs at this stage, is it immunization or what, and so on and so forth?
Okay, thank you very much. For us in Bayelsa, we need everything. Everything, I want to say. And for the water purification gadgets, we have not received anything of such in Bayelsa State. And for us, we are using the Ministry of Water Resources to get potable water for us, where they distribute with their tankers through His Excellency provided these tankers before now. And they'll get this water and supply every IDP camps. Every morning, afternoon, and evening, they move to every communities these tankers can get to, even the water tankers. They move around every communities to give potable water to our citizens. Though it's not enough, and we started getting water guard from my ministry as part of the Dignity Park. When we go out, we distribute this water guard inside a Dignity Park. They name everything inside a Dignity Park. It's what we give out to women and children, even men, to ensure they use it for their safe water. Because for my own, when the water took over my house, I noticed that the borehole water was smelling the same smell as the flood water. So that is what is every water in the Bayelsa State, even boreholes, were contaminated. And so I told my family not to drink from that water again, even my security, not even to eat bait from it. So I started getting water from the Ministry of Water Resources and also buying pure water for the family use. And we noticed before now, we usually have challenges in immunization in Bayelsa State. And we were very proactive at this point. When we set up the Flood Emergency Operations Center, we had the immunization team, the state immunization team, to be part of the EOC. And what we did, as the teams are going out every day, the immunization officers at the various communities where we have our health facilities, those health facilities that were not submerged, we sent out the vaccines to them, and those the mobile team, we were doing outreaches. And so for children who are just given birth to, we ensured they were immunized. And then in every community, children of under 5 years, we ensured they were all immunized. I don't have the statistics, the number of persons, but I'm sure at the end of this period, we're able to collate the number of children that we have vaccinated. Every morning, 9 a.m., I'm sure our team will be preparing to meet every 9 a.m. to review the statistics of the previous day and then what is ahead of us.
Okay. Well, cholera vaccination?
Yes.
Even for adults, not under 5 now.
No, for cholera vaccination, we ran out of the vaccine. And so we have written from my office, the Niger Delta Development NDDC, to ensure they should supply us about 1 million doses of vaccine, the cholera vaccine, and then a typhoid vaccine.
Have they replied?
They have not replied.
What about the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency based here in Abuja?
They have not replied.
Have
Like I said,
you are in Abuja. Hang on, you are in Abuja here, and they are not far from. It's a walking distance from
I
there.
will
So
do that.
at the end of the program, we will escort you there.
Yes, you know, you never allowed me to express myself the other time.
Okay, Dr.
Like I
Egbede.
said, we have not received any support from any agency.
And you have said that you need everything. So,
yes.
of course, you have also mentioned that you don't have anything and you need everything, like you said. And, of course, talking about needing everything, you talked about getting pure water or sachet water. In a situation like this, you wonder if the pure water is actually pure that you're buying, because,
It has been pre-processed.
well, let's just hope that, they're actually doing what they should do when you could get to buy that sachet water. But thank you so much for, letting us know the position of Bayelsa. You need everything, and I hope that you get, what you need so we can prevent this situation. I'll quickly go to Dr. Ojima now. You talked about the issues. It's enormous. What do we do now? How can we prevent the epidemics like you talked about? How can we reduce, the magnitude of, the health challenge that we're likely going to face as a result of these floods?
Thank you very much once again. Let us divide our actions into two. Prevention of infectious and communicable diseases, and also handling non-communicable diseases. We shouldn't lose sight of either in the next process we're going to deploy. What do I mean? I'm happy the Bayelsa Commissioner for Health said they are still doing their bit to immunize, because disruption of immunization could be catastrophic subsequently for the cohort involved in that disruption. Then the issue is this: let us not wait until this flood has dried before we start teaching the people in the IDP camps how to survive subsequently. The time is now to go and teach them about improved personal hygiene. When you go back, please don't drink from the water around you. We will supply you with water for the meantime. And please let our agencies mean it when they say it, because a thirsty man will drink whatever is available. Let us know that. The Dignity Park is something I heard today, and I think others should copy. Even the title is quite responsible. It restores the dignity of man in whatever sense. And those things should be calculated, all those things, water purifier, soap. As a dermatologist, let me tell you, prolonged contact with water becomes an irritation. Water is to be used on touch-and-go basis. If you put your feet in water for the next 1 to 2 hours, it starts wearing away your skin and it starts irritating you. So the basic implement at our disposal now is teaching them how to cope while they are in these IDP camps. Let us also raise jingles. Okay, Ministry of Information, you can help in this perspective. Collaborate with Ministry of Health. Raise jingles on healthy living after this flood. Don't drink the water. Don't dispose human waste very close to your place of habitation or where you get your source of water. Okay? Please, as much as possible, clear the weeds around your home when you go. Of course, government should intervene with fumigation of these homes when they finally could be recovered. Fumigation against snakes, and of course, insects like mosquito and stuff like that. And let it be known that once the flood dries, please don't discharge them immediately. Give them a week or more, with which time our agencies should be able to comb those areas that have now emerged from the flood to make sure they are habitable. Because if we just leave them to go, it will be disaster. And then also let us also look at the non-communicable side. When you still go, please find out those that are hypertensive. Find out those that are diabetic in those camps. We can help by replacing their drugs. At least those ones will not be a problem if they continue taking the drugs they are on until they can see their doctors once again. But mass education, mass information is vital. While we prepare for vaccination against cholera and the other yellow fever, and the other infectious diseases. But people that are well enlightened on how to prevent these problems will go a long way. It's almost 50% of the solution to the problem we are going to meet. So let's not wait until the flood has dried. Now that they are depending on you for water and food, please use the same opportunity to give them health education and teach them what they will face when they leave those camps and go back to their place.
And some of the donations that some of the states are also receiving could be deployed for purposes of public information and public enlightenment.
Oh, definitely.
It's not something that you would expect to come from the center.
I agree with
Just
you.
do it right there within the vicinity as quickly as possible in the languages that they will understand. Generate a wide range of informational materials and be sure that they percolate. Let's bring in again Professor Abdul Salami Nasidi. Professor Nasidi, well, you stopped midway and you said you will return to an idea you were pursuing with regard to what needs to be done under the current circumstance. Do we need, let me ask this question, in addition to what you would like to conclude with from what you started earlier, do we need, as it were, a national emergency response to the public health burden arising from the floods? For instance, by the National Council on Health convening an extraordinary meeting.
Well, as I had mentioned earlier, it's very important that we shouldn't ignore the lessons learned. If we want to prevent severe impact, then as some of the speakers had mentioned, lessons learned is so crucial and so important. And of course, following this, you need your short-term plan and then long-term plan. And from what I have seen, I have been following the flooding. I've seen that, to be frank, the federal government alone cannot do it. The governments of states alone can't do it. There's need for public-private partnership, and I'm happy that during the 2012 experience, there was a Dangote committee set up by the then President Jonathan, and they worked very effectively with the government to mitigate the impact of the flood. So I think this should be, emphasized more. I'm happy at the beginning I had the Dangote Foundation have donated 1.5 billion, and more other businesses should donate. NGOs are playing key role. What we should do, now to, reduce the suffering of the people already affected. For instance, the former immigration head established what is called Sure for You, and he's from Jigawa State. So when the flood affected Jigawa State, he quickly mobilized there. We supported him, and he went. He did a lot. I think the government, the private sector, the NGO, everybody should come to assist. These people are really in state of emergency. They are under the threat of the flood. They are under the threat of snake bites, other bites, and they are also under the threat now of enhanced poverty. So as you can see, it is something that
looks like we have the same challenge all the way from Abu Dhabi, not just Nigeria. Okay. Anyways, I just wish we could get Dr. Obidike back from Anambra, because we've heard from Bayelsa, we've heard from Jigawa what they actually want, so we can actually, hear from Anambra. But let me quickly go to Dr. Abuja. Before Dr. Nasidi, stopped talking from the bandwidth issue, he talked about an emergency. Yes, so of course we have all agreed this is an emergency. What do you think we need now? The enemy president has mentioned some of the ways we can reduce this problem a bit. Could you give us your own insights?
Yeah, I agree with him. Totally agree with him and the enemy president. This is a national emergency. See, health is affected, food is affected. We're going to have food insecurity, very severe one. There's already inflation in the country. There's already poverty in the country. And then you are talking, of course, insufficient housing. Then you have now tripled, multiplied the problem by I don't know how many folds. If I am Minister of Health, for example, the first thing I will do now, I will make sure I'm in constant communication with all the commissioners. And as soon as I have the opportunity, I will call a meeting of all of them.
Which is the Council of on
Of
Health.
Health.
Yes, I was
That's
talking
what we are
about.
talking
Yes.
about. I will ask them, state by state, with all the commissioners present, to review, to tell us, to give a report of what has happened in their individual states, with statistics. And that's why I'm talking of keeping records. Now, I'll bring in also Minister of Environment. The environment has been polluted in those places. Ecosystem has been destabilized. Now, every time you disturb the ecosystem, a lot of things happen. Zoonotic diseases begin to go up. And we're going to see some of that. Now, the things that every human being need have now been distorted. Therefore, for me, at this time, it's a national emergency. And there should be a coordinating ministry. And since me, personally, I'm from the health sector, I would say, if I were the Minister of Health, I would take a lead. Because no matter what you do, or no matter what you say, yes, housing and all, the most important thing is survival. And it is health. And therefore, we should be prepared. We should think of how do we supply water during floods, for example. How do we supply medicines during flood? The NMA president mentioned chronic diseases. It's not a small issue. Somebody who has diabetes, somebody who is diabetic, who has diabetes, somebody who is hypertensive, who is taking drug on a daily basis, you disrupt the intake of his drug because he doesn't have access to that drug for a week. The consequence can be very serious. And therefore, one, we need to I don't know which ministry the federal government would want to consider, but no matter what, let there be a coordination. Minister of Health, Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Environment, Science and Technology, all of them.
It would be the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs.
Fine.
Yes, because there you have all the branches and then the networks.
Fine.
Ministry of Water Resources, you've already mentioned. Of course, we know that the Presidential Committee on Flood Mitigation has been inaugurated. And of course, it's also interministerial. But dealing with the emergency is what you're talking about.
Yes.
And it's important so that it doesn't take quite a long. While we were discussing this, gentlemen, it occurred to me to try and remind us what happened 2 years ago during COVID. We saw a lot of warehouses that were stacked with all kinds of consumables. And of course, during the NSAS protest, some of these warehouses were broken into and people helped themselves to that. Is it to say, for instance, that those supplies that came from the private sector, most of them were by way of donations? That's what Professor Nasidi was talking about. Are the warehouses now plain? Have they been emptied, or have the goods or consumables they supplied, have they been exhausted? Have they expired? Can we reach out? Is there any fund lying somewhere to deal with some of these emergencies? So, gentlemen, we are unable to bring back the Anambra Commissioner for Health. We understand that the Zoom connection is still not strong. Dr. Kabir Ibrahim Jigawa, the Executive Secretary of the Primary Healthcare Agency in that state. Let's get your last take on this matter. They have a number of proposals now. Get your data as you are responding to all of these issues and you are confronting fresh challenges. Lend a voice, for instance, to the convening of an emergency Council of Health meeting and all others. What more would you like to say briefly?
Okay, thank you very much again for having me. Like I said, the data issue is a very valid point. We need to look forward and seeing the trend of known diseases and also the emergence of unknown diseases. We've had communication with so many aliens in our own environment that, flooded water has, brought them into our communities. It's likely that we may be seeing things that we are not even familiar with. So I think we need to watch out for this. And then we need to also have a long-term effect to make sure that these kind of things are arrested within the couple of years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kabir Ibrahim, the Executive Secretary, Jigawa State Primary Healthcare Agency. Thank you for joining us, and good morning, Nigeria Today. Also, I'd like to thank Professor Abdusalami Nasidi, who joined us from Abu Dhabi. Thank you so much, Prof, for your time. We appreciate you. All right, and also Dr. Afam Obidike, the Commissioner for Health, Anambra State, who joined us. I'm sure, okay, he's there. Thank you so much. Because of time, we cannot, continue, but I'm sure that you would have an opportunity some other time. Thank you, Dr. Obidike, Commissioner for Health, Anambra State. And right here in the studio, we want to thank Dr. Uche Ojima, the President of the Nigerian Medical Association. Thank you so much, sir. And we hope that your association would also help, in containing, whatever problem that we have.
We have already deployed.
Okay.
We have had many outreaches.
All right.
Especially in those states affected.
Okay.
Giving our little, as per help, free medical outreach, and also giving them some relief materials. We have done those.
That's great. Thank you so much. We'd like to see more of that so we can actually solve this problem. Thank you so much, Dr. Isaac Iboja, a public health specialist, for joining us and for your insights on Good Morning Nigeria. Last but not least, Dr. Pagbara Newton Igwele, you need everything. We hope you get everything. Commissioner of Health, Bayelsa State. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. That's Good Morning Nigeria for us for today and indeed for the week. We'll take a break for the weekend. I'm back on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, as I always say, look after yourselves, enjoy your weekend, and Kingston.
And I am Ian Ray John. Do have a great weekend.